We last we talked about the unions. Now we're going to get into some things here. Now, unions, their key concept is to keep the things going. And if they don't get what they want, they simply walk off the job or refuse to work, and that is called a strike. And it's been a big thing. It disrupts the social order. It disrupts the country making money. And at this time, the government responds in different ways. And so we're going to see those different ways that the government responds, okay? So we're going to look at 3 strikes in particular. They're the B&O Railroad strike, the Pullman strike, and of course Homestead Steel. All right. Now B&O Railroad, the railroads used to have a start and a stop point. So this would be Baltimore and Ohio. That means it started in Baltimore and it ended in Ohio. They broke up the tracks. They refused to work. And so how did the federal government, remember, federal government's not supposed to get involved, right? This laissez-faire. But again, you're disrupting things. So the president sends out, come on, federal troops to force the workers to go back to work. Major intervention here. They also issued injunctions, which we're going to talk about later on. But this is the first time that a president says, no, you can't strike. You have to go back to work. All right? Now, second strike we're going to talk about. Yeah, I think that was it. Make sure. Yeah. Okay. So, the second strike is Pullman. Now, George Pullman had a wonderful idea. He made these little cars for the railroads. His idea was to build a city around his factory and where people could live. Now the problem there is you eat, sleep, breathe the factory, and so there's no escape. Now what happened here is they went on strike. They were not happy. So the handler of the company decided to hire what are called scabs, and we'll talk about scabs later on. Basically, it's a non-unionized worker, and so they came in here, and while they're trying to go across, there was some violence. The police are called out. Again, intervention, right? Federal troops, or just any type of intervention. And as you can tell here, there's gunfire, there's things like this. People died, people were injured, and so they naturally put this on the unions. We don't really necessarily know who started this, but there it is with that. The last strike we're going to look at is Homestead Steel. Now, Homestead Steel, great thing going on here. We're going to get into this, if you will. Homestead Steel is the steel company that's controlled by Andrew Carnegie, right? And so Andrew Carnegie is kind of out of this. The people go on strike, and so the owner of the factory, whose name is Mr. Frick, will hire scabs to come in and work. He also hires a private detection agency known as the Pinkerton Detective Agency to come in and protect them. And what happens, much like we had in Pullman, we had violence. This time, before the violence gets really, really bad, the president again calls out, you guessed it, federal troops to either force them to go back to work or not prevent this from going on. So what do these 3 things have in common? The B&O Railroad, the Pullman, and the Homestead. In all these cases, federal troops and or police are called out to intervene. This completely goes against the concept of laissez-faire, but the idea is we want to make money. Whoever's making me money keeps me happy. And so in this case, if there's the owners and there are the workers, who's making the government more money? That would be the owners. And so they always side with them. Okay? Now, let's talk about it when it goes really, really bad. So what happened here? In Chicago, we had a Haymarket meeting. And so here it is, right? The mass meeting, 7:30. Good speakers be present to denounce the latest atrocious attack to the police, the shooting of our fellow workers yesterday. So what happened is, before this is going on, in Chicago they had a strike. The police were called out, somebody was shot. So they met at Haymarket, and they're going to talk about how these things are horrible up here in full. Now, what happened is, some other people saw this as an opportunity. So when they get to Haymarket, the police are naturally there. These things are going on, and there were in the midst a few anarchists. Now, anarchists do not believe in any form of government at all, and they threw bombs into the crowd, and people died, and as a result, people rioted. And so when this happens and riot happened, police go into their mode, which they have to do, and that is to control the situation as quickly as possible. And people misunderstand this tons of times, but this is what they're trying to do. And so in the process of putting this down and the anarchists are fighting back, many people died. And so when it comes out in the paper the next day, the Haymarket riot is put on the workers. Because actually they were the ones that called for the meeting, right? They're the ones that the anarchists kind of slipped in. They didn't invite the anarchists, but they kind of slipped in. So this is kind of the downfall of the early labor union. They kind of go quiet for a little while after this. They will, of course, reemerge in the 1920s and 1930s. We will talk about them as they come up. Now, the government after this decides to be proactive, and they will do a couple of things to prevent strikes from occurring. The first one is called a yellow dog contract. Very, very odd term, right? Yellow dog. Is that a old yeller? What is that? The whole idea is that if you don't see a yellow dog, I'm not talking about like a golden retriever, I'm talking yellow dog. When you see a yellow dog in the factory, you can have a unionist factory. The idea was to not allow unions. That's a yellow dog contract. Don't allow a union at all. Now, the next thing they could do is actually prevent the strike altogether. And they did this one of two ways, arbitration or injunctions. Now, an arbitration is like an umpire. We have two people warring in our, again, in Spanish, I'm bilingual, so here you are, right? An arbitro is an umpire. So arbitration, much like an umpire, he is there to enforce the rules and to solve any conflicts as they occur, correct? So if you call for arbitration, it's supposed to be an unbiased third party who comes out to settle a dispute. And so that is that. There is arbitration. It's an unbiased, meaning he doesn't care about brown or gray. He is there representing. He's going to listen to the facts and he's going to make a decision, and you have to live with it. Idea is to prevent a strike. Now, the other way they do this is by using the courts. And so let's suppose you don't want to do this. They can go to the judge, and the judge can issue what is called an injunction. Now, by virtue of this cartoon, what would you think an injunction is? You see it's blocking the path, correct? An injunction is a complete order to stop a strike and to go back to work. It's actually to stop doing something, in this case, stop the strike, go back to work. And so there you have that. Now, the next thing we have, and evidently I skipped over, but I'm going to go to it, is the idea that the country is being run by these monopolists. I love this cartoon, okay? Again, notice the big bellies because they're full of greed and money, and you can't really tell here, but this is supposed to be the Senate, where they make laws. So who's more important, the senators or the trusts? Well, naturally the trusts. They're bigger, right? They're bigger. Now, the Sherman Antitrust Act comes into effect here. Senator Sherman, same one with the Silver Purchase Act, decides to say that it is illegal to form trust or monopolies that would interfere with things going any further. And so the whole idea here is we're going to try to limit the effectiveness or the power of the trust. Now, this kind of holds off for a little while until we have President Roosevelt, who we're getting to later on, and he's going to kind of enforce this. So this will come up again, but I just wanted to understand where we're going with that. Now, the next thing we have here is the scab, and I kind of went through this, right? And so look what it says. After God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful stuff left, with which he made a scab. A scab is a two-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a waterlogged brain, and a combination backbone made of jelly and glue. Wherein others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. Judas Iscariot was a gentleman compared to Scab. Judas Iscariot is the man who sold Jesus Christ. For betraying his master, he had the character to hang himself. The scab isn't. There is nothing lower than a scab. And this was actually written by Jack London, who we will talk about later on. And so a scab is a non-unionized worker. They don't like them, as you can tell, and basically they're going to do whatever they're told. So they're a non-unionized worker. That was kind of a funny thing, all right? Now, last thing we have to talk about, right? I told you at the beginning, those are yesterday, or later on today. I'm getting confused. Bread and butter issues, right? How much am I working? How many hours? And lastly, safety. Now, safety comes into play in 1911 here with what is called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. This is the building. You can see there's all these things. Now, the problem is they had a fire, correct? And in this fire, hundreds of women died. And so we go and we discover, well, why did they die? How on earth is this possible? To prevent theft, all of the exits are blocked except for one. There are no safety fire escapes, correct? And the ones they did have on the back collapsed very quickly. And again, there are no sprinklers. So this is a raging fire inferno of death because of theft. And so the public saw this, and they saw some other things, and they became outraged and decided that they wanted to stop some things. And so they want to put some safety measures in play. The general idea here is we don't want something like this to happen again. And it's so sad that we have to have a tragedy before we actually do something, but that's the best way we learn. All right? So, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire is now, that video there is a crazy thing from the 80s. You want to go watch it. It's actually called The Safety Dance. Has nothing to do with this whatsoever. It's just where my crazy ADD mind went at this point, and that was Safety Dance. And you can dance if you want to, but so go watch that later on if you want to. So the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was because of a lack of safety, and safety issues will be addressed after this. Now, the objectives you need to do here: explain how the Sherman Antitrust hurt workers and owners alike. Ooh, gotta think. And then also describe what happens when unions, or when unions turn violent. Think about that Haymarket riot. Think about the strikes. What happens? All right. That is it for this chapter. The next thing we're going to pick on is immigration. When people come to this country to work, to have a better life, what happens there? All right.